Hello and welcome to the Indiana Lawyer Podcast, your source for news in Hoosier law, brought to you by Taft. I'm Alexa Shrake, Indiana Lawyer reporter and your host this week. As always, I'm here in our Monument Circle studio with managing editor Daniel Carson and reporter Maura Johnson to give you the rundown on the latest legal news. Plus, I chat with Linda Calvin, Chief Impact Officer at Reboot Representation and President of Transcend Consulting, about Women in Tech Week. So, let's get started. Today is Wednesday, September 4th, 2024, and these are your headlines. To start, Maura, you have news from Southern Indiana. What can you tell us?
An Evansville diner owner must pay $390,000 in back wages and liquidated damages to employees after the U.S. Department of Labor discovered his restaurant operated an invalid tip pool and committed other offenses. On February 28th, the Labor Department filed a complaint in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Indiana, seeking the award of back wages and damages to 44 employees working for Friendship Diner, LLC. The court issued an order on August 20th for the payment. The complaint was filed after employees failed to resolve the findings of an investigation by the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. During its investigation, the division discovered the employer operated an illegal tip-sharing pool by requiring servers to return $10 in tips for each weekday shift and $15 for each weekend shift to management. The employers then either kept the tips or used them to pay bussers' hourly wages. The investigation also found that the diner's owner, Bardhile Shabani, failed to pay overtime at time and one-half the regular rate of pay for hours over 40 in a work week. Shabani also failed to pay workers the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour and didn't keep accurate payroll records. In March, the Department of Labor filed a request for a restraining order and injunction after learning Shabani was harassing and threatening employees and was trying to coerce them into giving false statements to investigators about the tip pool. Then in May, the district court filed an order forbidding the diner's employers from any form of harassment, intimidation, or retaliation. In addition to paying the $390,000, Shabani owes $10,000 in civil money penalties and is forbidden from future violations of the Fair Labor Standards Act. The Indiana lawyer reached out to Shabani, who sent us a statement that reads in part, quote, "We are thankful the government agreed to resolve the case in a way that mostly benefits current and former employees. We are grateful that most of the settlement money will go to them and stay in our community. We sincerely hope our current and former employees accept the money and it improves their lives. We are saddened by many of the things said about us in the news and on social media. Much of it is untrue," end quote.
Thanks, Maura. Moving to Daniel, you also have news out of Vanderburgh County.
A Vanderburgh County judge has sentenced a man to 50 years in prison, the maximum allowable sentence, for 2 felony child molesting convictions. Judge Les Shively of the Vanderburgh Superior Court sentenced Oscar Rax G. last week to the maximum allowable sentence for his conviction of a Level 1 felony child molesting charge and an additional concurrent 11 years for his conviction on a Level 4 felony child molesting charge. A jury found G guilty of 2 counts of child molesting in July. In July 2023, Holly's House conducted a forensic interview and uncovered the sexual abuse of an 8-year-old child. Throughout the investigation, G made comments about fleeing back to Guatemala. At the sentencing hearing, the judge heard details that the abuse spanned the child's lifetime and included continuous sexual and physical abuse while the child was kept inside a house and away from society. The child has remaining mental and physical scars, according to the Vanderburgh County Prosecutor's Office. She will also be a credit-restricted felon and have a lifetime designation as a sexually violent predator.
Thanks, Daniel. I covered the Indiana Judicial Nominating Commission meeting a couple weeks ago, in which it selected Chief Justice Loretta Rush to serve another 5 years leading the High Court. This will be her 3rd term as Chief Justice. Rush was appointed to the bench in 2012. 2 years later, she was selected as Chief Justice, making history as the first woman to serve in that role. She was then reappointed for a 2nd term in 2019. She has been the only woman on the High Court's bench for all of her 12 years as a justice. Concluding with interviews of all 5 Indiana Supreme Court justices, the commission unanimously voted to retain Rush as Chief Justice. Following the vote, Rush said that she felt like she had a lot of work to get started on. Now going back to Daniel, what can you share about a recent 7th Circuit ruling?
Indiana's requirements for ballot access by petition are constitutional, the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals ruled, in upholding a lower court's ruling and rejecting a legal challenge on behalf of third-party political candidates. According to court records, the plaintiffs in the case were the Indiana Green Party, the Libertarian Party of Indiana, and candidates and other individuals associated or formally associated with those parties. They brought the lawsuit against the Secretary of State of Indiana and the United States District Court for the Southern District of Indiana, with the parties asserting claims under the First Amendment, as incorporated against the states by the 14th Amendment, as well as under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. In affirming the District Court's judgment in favor of the Secretary of State's office, the 7th Circuit pointed out that a candidate can obtain ballot access by obtaining signatures numbering at least 2% of the total votes cast in their election district in the last election. The Circuit Court found that the U.S. Supreme Court and 7th Circuit had established precedent that requiring the signatures of 2% of the electorate was constitutionally permissible, as was the state's June 30th filing deadline for submitting signatures to the counties. It also found that states have broad authority to impose reasonable, non-discriminatory restrictions on access to the ballot, with Indiana's ballot access restrictions challenged in the case easily passing scrutiny that the U.S. Supreme Court and 7th Circuit have employed in similar cases. In its ruling, the 7th Circuit noted that it was clear that the restrictions being challenged did not severely burden the plaintiff's First and 14th Amendment rights.
Thanks, Daniel. Maura, what can you tell us about a Valparaiso couple?
A Valparaiso couple was awarded more than $25 million in damages by a Lake County jury after a medical center failed to transfer test results that contained information about the husband's cancer diagnosis. According to a news release from the Allen Law Group, the plaintiff, 70-year-old George Tim Yaros, had blood work done on October 4, 2017 at the St. Mary Medical Center in Valparaiso. The results of that work showed Yaros had localized cancer. However, the medical center never sent those results to the specialist who ordered the work, and Yaros' cancer wasn't discovered until 13 months later. By then, the tumor had grown to stage 4, and Yaros went into renal failure. While he survived, Yaros now requires dialysis and lifetime treatment. He was awarded $21.8 million, while his wife was awarded $4 million for the suffering she experienced during her husband's diagnosis and treatment. The same day the couple was awarded their damages, the Lake Superior Court denied the St. Mary Medical Center's motion for judgment on the evidence. Judge John Cedia wrote that there was no lack of quantitative or qualitative evidence against the medical center. Quote, had St. Mary timely sent the PSA results to Dr. Barackett on October 4th, 2017, and fulfilled the standard of care, either Tim would have timely received the treatment he needed, or, at worst, the responsibility for not treating him immediately would have fallen solely on Dr. Barackett, Cedia wrote. Cedia said Yaros' urologist's name was on the cover sheet of the medical center's fax, so it can be inferred that the medical center knew the urologist was involved but failed to send her the test results. The Indiana lawyer reached out to the medical center's communications person and the attorneys representing the center for responses regarding the judgment. As of the recording of this podcast, we did not receive responses.
Thanks, Maura. The Indiana Capitol Chronicle reported former Clark County Sheriff Jamie Knoll pleaded guilty to 27 of 31 felony charges last week. Knoll was charged with more than 24 felonies for allegedly misusing money from the fire and EMS departments he oversaw. The charges came following an investigation by the Indiana State Police. According to a plea agreement submitted to the Clark Circuit Court, Knoll pleaded guilty to charges of theft, money laundering, corrupt business influence, official misconduct, obstruction of justice, and tax evasion. 4 charges of ghost employment were dismissed as part of the agreement. Knoll faces a 15-year prison sentence, with 3 of those years suspended to probation if the deal is approved by Special Judge Larry Medlock. There is not a sentencing hearing set at this time. Knoll's wife, Misty, who has since filed for divorce from her husband, and daughter, Casey, separately face charges of theft and tax evasion. Both have pleaded not guilty. Medlock set a trial date of October 28th and said the trials can be combined if the 2 sides can agree on how to handle the jury pool. Now back to Maura for news out of Delaware County.
Charges were filed against 4 teenagers for their roles in the murder of a 15-year-old on August 14th, according to the Delaware County Prosecutor's Office. The suspects were identified as 16-year-old Kayshawn English, 17-year-old Robert Graham, 19-year-old Daisha Eckford, and 19-year-old Ricky Nathan. The victim, 15-year-old Lottajon Phillips, was found suffering from multiple gunshot wounds at the Creekside Apartments on the northeast side of Muncie. He was taken to the hospital where he later died. Surveillance footage and witnesses in the area reported seeing 6 individuals running from the Creekside Apartments to the Elgin Manor Apartments, where they entered one of the apartments. Daisha Eckford, who lived in the apartment, told police the group was going to, quote, make a play, and headed towards Creekside. Not trusting the situation, Eckford stayed behind, but said she heard gunshots before seeing the group return, according to reports. She said no one would tell her what had happened. Inside her apartment, officers found several items of clothing the suspects were seen wearing, as well as multiple firearms and live rounds of ammunition. 17-year-old Robert Graham was charged with murder in addition to charges of robbery resulting in serious bodily injury, conspiracy to commit robbery resulting in serious bodily injury, and obstruction of justice. Eckford was also charged with conspiracy to commit robbery resulting in serious bodily injury and obstruction of justice. She is also charged with aiding, inducing, or causing robbery resulting in serious bodily injury. The other suspects involved were charged with multiple felonies. The prosecutor's office is also pursuing charges in the juvenile court against a 14-year-old for his alleged participation in events surrounding the murder. The county's prosecuting attorney, Eric Hoffman, said he cannot comment further on the case.
And finally, to wrap up this week's headlines, Daniel, tell us about what you are working on for our next print issue.
Senate Bill 1, which passed in the 2024 Indiana legislative session, tightens the state's policy for holding back and remediating young children who don't demonstrate reading proficiency by 3rd grade, unless they meet one of a few exceptions. My story will look at the new law, and I'll speak with the law's supporters and critics with concerns about the law's potential impacts on students. You can read all about it in our September 11th issue.
Okay, that'll do for this week's headlines. As always, if you want more legal news, check us out at theindianalawyer.com. Stick around after our sponsor break to hear my interview with Linda Calvin.
Taft, today's modern law firm. At Taft, we cultivate a highly respectful, transparent workplace that fosters creativity, teamwork, inclusion, and diversity. We couple our culture with a client-first approach, rewarding lawyers who understand their clients' goals and work to deliver success. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
I have with me today Linda Calvin, Chief Impact Officer at Reboot Representation and President of Transcend Consulting. Prior to switching career fields a decade ago, you were Assistant City Prosecutor for the Indianapolis Office of the Corporation Counsel. So to start, Linda, how did you get into the tech field and why did you make the switch?
So I got into tech many, many years ago when my sister asked me what my plan for life was. And I was working in a glass company here downtown Indianapolis as an office manager. And I said, and I get to drink beer on Fridays. And she was like, okay, so that's not a plan. And so she invited me to apply for a position at Wishart Memorial Hospital, now Eskenazi, as a systems operator. And I said, I don't know anything about that, Diana. And she said, that's okay, we'll teach you. And so that really started my journey into tech. So from there, I moved into different roles. I spent 20 years at Dow AgriSciences, now Corteva, leading IT and digital and mobile application development. And while I was there, I earned my Juris Doctor. And so I worked for the city of Indianapolis, did a lot of pro bono work for Indianapolis Legal Aid Society. But then I got the siren call back to tech. I missed it. And so I went back into tech. And really from there, I began to move into different roles. I was vice president of the School of IT at Ivy Tech Community College, which I love that job, and then led me to the job I have today.
Can you explain a little bit what it is that you do in your job today?
So I'm the Chief Impact Officer for Reboot Representation. And Reboot Representation is a national nonprofit funded by Pivotal Ventures, which is Melinda French Gates' incubation company. And our goal is to double the number of Black, Latina, and Native American women earning computing degrees by 2025. So we're almost at mission. We will continue on our mission, but we'll focus a little earlier in the pipeline to intervene at high school and middle school with Black, Latina, and Native American girls. And my role is to work with companies who are members of our coalition, our Reboot family, we call it. There's tech companies, there's UKG, there's Walmart, a host of companies. And my job is to work with them and to help them create or sustain an inclusive culture. Because what we know is women are leaving tech. And actually, Accenture did a study in 2019, and their research revealed that by age 35, 50% of women leave tech due to non-inclusive cultures. So my CEO was like, you know what? We're focused on early career and getting women into baccalaureate degrees because our focus is at baccalaureate. But we also need someone to work with companies so when women enter their workforce, that they stay. So my job is to be a +1 for any company who needs my services. And that could be, aside from legal counsel, I'm not allowed to give that because I work with companies around the United States. But, you know, if they say we need help figuring out why our ERGs aren't as engaging, or Linda, can you come and speak at a town hall about, you know, how to stay on? I am there to be their +1. That's my job.
So do you feel like having your JD helps you with what you're doing?
Absolutely, it does. You know, earning the Juris Doctor really, number one, opens your eyes to processes. And I remember the very first time a friend of mine talked to me about getting my JD, he said, you should consider getting a law degree. And I was like, I said, that's too black and white for me. And he said, no, at the end of every question for a lawyer, and he was going to law school, is, well, it depends. He said, because of the process for how it works. So when I earned my Juris Doctor, when I was still at Dow leading tech, I could challenge when we had certain business leaders who would say, well, we want to do this. And I'm like, okay, legally, you can't do that. Or you can't just grab a song from any place and put it in your YouTube video. So some of that was just very practical legal experience that I've been able to use. But also to speak with authority and come from a different perspective because you're taught process, because I don't know, the law degree just helps you look at the world so completely differently and analyze problems that it really has helped me in all of my roles, but especially in this one, because I'm also working with HR and diversity leaders, and they respect the fact that, hey, she's a lawyer. Maybe she hasn't practiced employment law, but she knows if I'm talking about something with her, she knows that what we face and understands what we can and cannot do.
So, you know, coming up is Indiana is the first state to have annual Women in Tech Week, which will be September 15th to the 22nd. You know, how did it feel for you when Governor Eric Holcomb signed that into proclamation?
It was so amazing. I was so excited, and I got to join the Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Opportunity Officer, Kara Herring, on stage at Infosys at the Ball State Women Working in Tech Conference. And there's a picture of me where I'm just like my fist in the air. So I was so happy because it's time to recognize women and the work that we do to contribute to the tech economy. You know, Indiana received 3 federal tech hub designations last year. And, you know, there was a study recently by CompTIA. We added over 3,500 jobs in tech last year. So women are an integral part of that. And a lot of times you may not hear from us. You may see women who are working in tech companies, but you're not hearing from the women who are boots on the ground behind product design, protecting systems. And so when he signed it, I was just like, yes, this is awesome. And then it occurred to me, we are the only state in the United States, not California, not New York, not Florida, not Texas, where Austin is. We are the only state in the US to have a dedicated annual Women in Tech Week. And when I hear from people in my travels, because I travel all across the United States, and they always go, really, Indiana? And I'm like, yes, really. Indiana. You think of Indiana as a place there's only agriculture, which, by the way, people who work in agriculture are tech savvy. We are a tech savvy state by default of our industries, biosciences. So I'm always very proud to say, yes, we did this. And I'm so excited that Governor Holcomb signed it. When he did sign it, my husband's like, do you want to celebrate with champagne? And I said, no, I want to celebrate with a chili dog from Freddy's. And so that's what I celebrated with.
Sounds good. Why do you feel like it's important to have a week dedicated to women in tech? I know you kind of talked about that a little bit already.
I think it's really important because, number one, now, and especially with the evolution of AI and how, when I talk to people, I say AI is like the internet was in the 90s. That's the impact. We're not talking just cloud technology. We're not talking just something that is fantastical, but this is changing the way we do everything, right? And so we need for our young women and girls to see that they can do this, because this is where we're going. So to not see role models, to not hear the voices of women who are working in tech can be discouraging to young girls, because you want to look up and see someone who looks like you. So Indiana Women in Tech is really important because those girls and those young women and those college students can see us and they can go, okay, I can do this. There's nothing that I can't do as a girl. I can be a CIO. I can do threat analysis for Lilly. I can do all of these things in tech. I can be an AI leader in tech because I see women around me, but also because, as I said, tech is essential. Who thought many years ago that our lives would depend so much so that we can't get on a plane when they had the CrowdStrike issue a few weeks ago? Americans couldn't fly anywhere. That's the impact of technology today. And so we should all have access to learning technology and participating in this economy that is changing how we live our daily lives. And so in order to do that, we need to amplify the voices of women and we need to see them, because when you see us, you can be us.
That's a really good points that you made there. What are some of the things that people are doing for that week?
So there are a number, and there are more and more events that are coming in through the website, IndianaWomenInTechWeek.com. There's an events tab. So there, Girl Scouts is doing a number of events. They have Tinkerfest. They have some really cool events they're doing with girls. They have a coding is legit, which is really cool. But I'm hosting an event as my side hustle of Transcend Consulting with the 811 group and Pass the Torch for Women on Mentorship. On that Monday, there's another event happening at Ivy Tech. There's more to tech than coding. There's going to be an event hosted at Infosys that's going to feature some of our legislative leaders talking about the importance of women in tech. So there's just a whole host. And Fort Wayne Tech, actually in Fort Wayne, they're having a number of events, and their mayor actually proclaimed a day for women in tech. So there's an actual mayoral proclamation as well. So it's happening across the state on college campuses as well. So anyone can go to the events page and see all the different events happening. And I'll say this too, Pippa Mann with former Indy race car driver. She's hosting an event called Women in Motorsports, of course, very steeped in technology. And that's happening. And they just released tickets last night. There's a limited amount of tickets. That's happening at Tom Wood Porsche that week. So just all kinds of cool stuff happening.
Yeah, that's very exciting. You mentioned AI already a little bit. You moderated a panel recently on how AI is affecting artists and even looked at it from a legal perspective as well. What was your biggest takeaway from that panel?
Wow, the law has a lot of catching up to do with AI. And not that, it's thinking about, there's precedents just now starting to be set right? There's litigation happening right now, but there's so much. What is art? And if I used an app to create a really cool piece of art just for fun, and it's like, okay, so who owns it now? Is this my art, or does the art belong to the app? Or was there did they train the algorithm for this app by scraping other artists? And then is there a share that goes to, can an artist go and see my piece of art and go, wait a minute, I've done something just exactly like that. That algorithm was trained on my art. So there is so much that's going to happen from a legal perspective, and we are just getting started. There'll be some decisions made that probably won't be very popular. There will be some decisions made that protect artists, especially artists, and artists now need to start thinking about copyright. They need to start thinking about all these things. And somebody said, what if I can't afford a lawyer? And I'm like, you know what? You will be able to find a lawyer, I guarantee you. But precedents are being set. So that was the biggest takeaway for me, is that there's a lot of lift that the law is going to have to do in this space.
Well, I think that covers most of my questions for you. Is there anything else that you want to just add that I didn't think to ask you?
They can learn, anyone here, anyone in Indiana, anyone listening can learn more about Indiana Women in Tech Week at indianawomenintechweek.com. We have resources to where you can get data, actual data that shows the representation of women. You could see the events. There's a speakers bureau of Jedi women in tech who will speak at your events. We have a speaking of page that's going live where we're getting sound bites from people all across the state. And we have a merch store, and there's only 2 things in it right now, but we're adding more things every day. So go to Indiana Women in Tech Week and find out what's going on and be part of this amazing week that Governor Holcomb has created and proclaimed for us. And we hope that the rest of the United States follows Indiana's lead.
All right. So that'll do for this week's interview. Linda, thank you again for joining me today. And to our listeners, head over to theindianalawyer.com to hear our past interviews. You can also find us on your favorite podcast apps. We'll talk to you soon.